Have you ever loved God with everything you had, and still felt as though He was allowing everything you feared to happen? Have you ever been faithful, truly faithful, not just in the easy seasons, but in the ones that cost you, and still watched yourself lose something you were certain He would protect? Have you ever looked at your own suffering and asked, not in anger, but in the raw honesty of a soul at its limit, why does He love me this way? There is a woman who was beaten by illness, dismissed by her superiors, misunderstood by her confessors, and told, more than once, that the visions she was experiencing might be delusions. She wrote it all down. She kept loving. She kept trusting. She died at 33, in a convent bed, with the face of someone who had been pressed through something so refining and so terrible that she emerged not broken, but molten, poured into a shape no suffering she had avoided could have created. Her name is Saint Faustina Kowalska, and she knew, not as a theory, not as a consolation offered in a homily, but as a lived, documented, bone-deep certainty, why God allows the souls He loves most to suffer most. You already know that suffering is real. You do not need a video to confirm that. You have felt it in your body, in your relationships, in that particular silence of a prayer that seems to go nowhere, sent upward and returned unopened. What you are looking for is not confirmation that pain exists. You are looking for something true to hold while it does. Faustina can give you that, not because she was spared, but because she was not. She was born in 1905 in a small village in Poland, the third of 10 children. Her family was poor in the way that means you understand from childhood that the world does not bend for you. She wanted to enter religious life early and was refused. She worked as a housekeeper for years, saving money, asking, waiting. When she was finally accepted into the congregation of the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy, she was not placed in the beautiful spiritual life she had imagined. She was given work in the kitchen, the garden, the bakery. She was moved between convents. She suffered chronic, debilitating tuberculosis that she hid from her community for a long time because she was afraid of being dismissed. And then, in the middle of all of this ordinary, exhausting, undramatic life, Jesus appeared to her. Not to reward her for surviving, not to tell her that the hard part was over, to ask more of her. This is the first thing Faustina teaches. God does not appear in your suffering to remove it. He appears in it to deepen it, and through that depth, to deepen you. I desire that you know more profoundly the love that burns in my heart for souls, Jesus told her, not to explain it from a distance, to bring her inside it. There is a difference between the suffering that happens to you and the suffering you are brought through. The first kind lands on you like weather, cold, indiscriminate, without meaning. The second kind is something else entirely. It is shaped, it is directed, it has a before and an after. And the soul that has been brought through it, not carried around it, not spared it, but through it, is permanently different. It is not the same soul that entered. Think of it this way. You have seen what happens to metal in fire. Before the fire, it holds whatever shape it was poured into. It is functional, maybe even useful, but it is not what it could become. The fire does not destroy the metal. It makes it possible to reshape it into something that could not have existed otherwise. The fire is not the enemy of the metal. The fire is the condition of its transformation. God allows suffering in the lives of those He loves because those are the lives He intends to transform. Not cosmetically, not superficially, not in ways that are comfortable to observe from the outside, but in the deepest chambers of the soul, where pride lives and fear lives and self-reliance lives, where the soul has built small kingdoms for itself that must be gently, persistently, sometimes painfully dismantled before it can receive what God has for it. Faustina understood this. She did not enjoy it. She did not perform equanimity. In her diary, one of the most honest spiritual documents in the history of the Church, she writes with full emotional honesty about her desolation, her exhaustion, her fear that she has been deceived, her desire for things to be easier. There is not a single line in which she pretends, and through all of it, beneath all of it, she clings to something that does not depend on her feelings. The mercy of God is not conditional on how she feels about the process. I see that God never tries us beyond what we are able to suffer, she writes. And she means this not as a pious formula, but as a conclusion drawn from the evidence of her own life. She was tried beyond what she thought she could bear. She was not crushed. She did not fully understand why until much later. And even later she did not understand everything. Only enough. Only enough to keep going. Only enough to write it down so that you, reading this now, in whatever suffering has found you, would have something true to hold. Stop for a moment, not to solve anything. Just to ask yourself honestly, where in your life has God been working in you through something you did not choose? Not manufacturing meaning from nothing, but genuinely, looking back, where do you see the shape of something being refined? The suffering He allows in your life is not proof that He has forgotten you. It is, in the interior logic of His mercy, proof that He has not finished with you. The unfinished soul is the loved soul. The soul He has abandoned to itself is the soul He stops pressing. The soul He keeps pressing, keeps shaping, keeps bringing through. That soul is the soul He intends to become something specific, something only that particular fire could produce. He is not done with you. That is why it still hurts. There is a question you may not have permitted yourself to ask aloud, because it feels ungrateful, or faithless, or too honest for a religious context. What is the point? Not the abstract theological point, the personal point. What is the point of this specific suffering in your specific life at this specific moment? What is it actually accomplishing? Faustina asked. Not once, repeatedly in the kind of raw returning petition that marks a soul that does not perform acceptance, but genuinely wrestles with it. And over time, through her conversations with Jesus documented in the diary, an answer emerged. Not complete, not comfortable, but true. The suffering of the beloved accomplishes three things. The first, it purifies. Not in the punitive sense, as though God is working through a list of offenses, checking them off one by one through corresponding pain. That is not the logic of mercy. The purification that suffering brings is more like the work of a surgeon than the work of a jailer. The surgeon does not cut because he is angry. He cuts because there is something inside the body that will kill it if it stays. The pain of the procedure is not the goal. It is the cost of the removal. What needs to be removed from the soul, and Faustina is explicit about this in herself, is the attachment to self, the subtle insistence on one's own understanding, the clutching of one's own will as though it were more reliable than God's. Suffering loosens the grip. It is very difficult to cling to your own plan when your own plan is no longer holding. The second, it conforms. This is the language of the mystics, but it means something accessible and specific. Conformity to Christ means that the soul begins to resemble Him, not in the external behaviors only, not in the religious practices only, but in the interior disposition, in the willingness to receive what the Father permits, in the capacity to continue to love when love is not returned, in the ability to trust in the darkness. Christ did not suffer because He had to be punished. He suffered because love, taken to its fullest expression, does not stop at the cost. The soul that is conformed to Him begins, slowly, imperfectly over the course of years, to develop this same quality of love, not to manufacture it through effort, to receive it through being pressed into His shape. Faustina writes about a particular vision in which Jesus shows her His wounds, not as a spectacle, as an invitation. Look at my hands, look at my feet, look at my side, and tell me, does your suffering compare to mine? This is not a competition or a dismissal of her pain. It is an orientation. It is Jesus saying what you are going through has a prototype. You are not inventing a new kind of suffering. You are entering something that has already been walked, already been redeemed, already been given meaning from the inside. When your suffering is placed inside His suffering, it is not diminished, it is located. You are not lost in pain. You are in a place that has been mapped. The third, it intercedes. This is perhaps the most surprising gift. The suffering of a soul that offers itself to God does not remain private. It becomes prayer. It becomes something that moves, that reaches, that arrives in places the soul's words never could. The Church has always known this. It is the theology of redemptive suffering, rooted in Paul's letter to the Colossians. I fill up in my flesh what is still lacking in regard to Christ's afflictions, for the sake of His body, which is the Church. Not because Christ's suffering was insufficient, it was infinite, but because he chooses to involve us, because he allows our suffering, offered in love, to carry weight for others, to arrive at the throne of mercy on behalf of souls we may never meet. Faustina's diary is full of this. Jesus asks her to suffer for specific souls, for priests, for the dying, for souls in the greatest need of his mercy. She is asked to carry something not only for herself, but as a spiritual work, as a hidden ministry that runs beneath the visible surface of her life. And she does it, not always with joy, not always without exhaustion, but with the settled conviction that nothing she offers is wasted. Think of someone in your life who is suffering right now, someone who has been suffering for a long time, who has not found the reason, who is not in a position to see any fruit from it yet. What if their suffering, had offered even partially, even imperfectly, even in a whisper, is accomplishing something they cannot see? What if it is carrying weight for someone they love in ways that will not be visible until much later? This is not a consolation prize. This is a theology of love that is far larger than we typically permit ourselves to believe. God does not waste what is given to him. He does not take suffering from a soul that loves him and lay it aside as irrelevant. He takes it and he uses it, and the soul that offered it will understand, at some point in this life or in the next, exactly what that offering accomplished. Faustina would sit beside you in whatever room you're in right now and say, quietly, not as someone who has escaped pain, but as someone who has been all the way through it, give it to him. Do not perform the giving. Do not wait until you mean it perfectly. Give it roughly, honestly, with all the questions still attached. He receives that too. There is a specific kind of suffering that is harder than physical pain. It is the suffering of the soul that has prayed and loved and trusted, and then gone through a season in which none of that seems to matter. The prayers feel hollow. The presence that was once so close and so real now feels absent. The faith is still there. You have not abandoned it. But it is dry in a way that frightens you. And you wonder if you have done something wrong, or changed in a way you cannot identify, or if God has simply moved on to other concerns. This is called spiritual desolation, and it is one of the most common experiences in the interior life, and one of the most misunderstood. Faustina knew it. She writes about it with a precision that only someone who has lived it deeply could manage. She writes about periods in which the light seemed completely withdrawn, in which the certainty she had known felt like something that happened to a different person, in which she continued attending to prayer, to duty, to the demands of community life, with nothing to fuel her but the memory of what had been and the faint, stubborn conviction that something was still there, even though she could not feel it. I will not be frightened by anything, she writes in one of these seasons. I will bear all things by the strength of God. Notice that she does not say the strength feels available. She does not say she is experiencing the strength. She says she will bear all things by it, in advance of the feeling, as an act of will directed at a God she cannot currently sense. This is faith in its most essential form. Not the faith of consolation, not the faith that rides on feeling and experience and the warmth of divine closeness, but the faith that continues when none of that is present. The faith that says, I believe not because I feel it, but because I know it to be true. I believe not because the evidence of this moment supports it, but because the evidence of everything I have known before this moment does. The spiritual directors of the Church, from John of the Cross to Ignatius to Francis de Sales, have written carefully about desolation. And they are consistent on one point. Desolation is not the same as abandonment. The feeling of God's absence is not the fact of his absence. God does not withdraw his grace when he withdraws the felt sense of his presence. He withdraws the felt sense because there is something he needs to develop in the soul that only develops in the absence of consolation. He is in the interior life, the way a wise parent gradually stops doing for the child what the child can now do for itself. Not to be cruel, not to be absent, but because growth requires the exercise of the capacity that has been developing. The soul that has been fed on consolation and suddenly finds the consolation withdrawn has one of two responses. It can conclude that God is gone, and in that conclusion contract, become bitter, stop its interior work. Or it can discover something it did not know it had, a faith that does not depend on feeling, a love that operates at a deeper level than emotion, a trust that has been woven into the texture of the soul over years of small, daily, faithful acts, and that now proves itself in the absence of everything that made faithfulness easy. Faustina would know your dry season. She has been in it. And she would say to you something she writes in the diary, something that is not a platitude, but a theological statement. The feeling is not the love. The consolation is not the grace. What you are in the dry season is not less than what you were in the warm one. You are being asked to demonstrate something. Not to God, He already knows what is in you, to yourself. Think of a time you loved someone through a period of difficulty, when they were not easy to be with, when the relationship was costly and gave little back for a time, and you loved them anyway, not performatively, not to prove a point, simply because they were yours, and love is not something you withdraw because the circumstances become hard. In that moment, was your love less real than it was in the easy seasons? Or was it in fact more completely itself, purified of the self-interest and comfort-seeking that are always mixed in when love is easy? The dry season of prayer is the same experience. The love that continues when consolation is absent is the love that has found its own foundation. And this is what God is after, not the love that needs to be fed on experience, the love that simply is, rooted, quiet, persistent, real. Faustina writes near the end of her life, after years of all of this, "I have placed my trust in God, and I am not afraid of anything. Not because everything was resolved, not because the suffering had ended, but because the foundation had been found, tested and held, because the love had proven itself not dependent on how it felt. The suffering of desolation, endured faithfully, produces this. And this unshakable, proven, self-forgetful love is exactly what God intends for you. You are not abandoned in the dry season. You are being grown. There is a question underneath all questions about suffering. It is not why. It is, for what? Why implies cause, something in the past. For what implies purpose, something in the future. And the difference between those two questions is the difference between looking at your suffering as wound and looking at it as work. Not because it is not a wound, it is. But every work that God does in the soul has the quality of a wound before it has the quality of a gift. The opening must come before the filling. Faustina's life, taken as a whole, is the most sustained answer to the question, for what, that the 20th century produced. And the answer is this: He is making you into someone who can be trusted with mercy. Not trusted to dispense mercy as though it were yours to give, but trusted to carry it, to embody it, to be a point of transmission for it in the world. The soul that has been through suffering and has not been made hard by it, the soul that has experienced the interior dark and emerged still open, still tender, still capable of being moved by the suffering of another, that soul becomes something the world desperately needs. It becomes mercy made visible. This is what Jesus asked of Faustina. Not that she become perfect, not that she become impressive, that she become transparent, so transparent to His mercy that when suffering souls looked at her, they saw something that reassured them that they were not beyond reach, that God's love was real for people who were exactly as broken as they were. She was chosen not despite her weakness, but through it. Her poverty, her actual material poverty as a child, her interior poverty as a soul that had little to offer but its willingness, her physical poverty as a sick woman dying slowly in a convent, this poverty was not the obstacle to her mission. It was the qualification. Only a soul that has been poor can speak with authority to poverty. Only a soul that has suffered can sit beside suffering without flinching. Only a soul that has been in the dark and found something true there can hold a candle for another soul that is in the same dark now. The chaplet of divine mercy, which came to Faustina through a vision and which now echoes through the whole church, is built on a single act of poverty. Eternal Father, I offer you the body and blood, soul and divinity of your dearly beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, in atonement for our sins and those of the whole world. The soul praying has nothing of its own to offer, nothing adequate. It does not pretend otherwise. It takes what Christ has offered, his own life, his own love, his own merit, and holds it up in the hands of its own emptiness. This is prayer at its most honest. This is the theology of the poor soul. I have nothing. Here is his everything. Take it. Let it be enough. And in this radical act of acknowledged poverty, the soul is most available to God. Because when you are holding nothing of your own, your hands are open to receive whatever he chooses to place there. You are in the midst of something. You may not know what it is yet. You may not see the shape of what is being made. This is not unusual. The metal in the fire does not know what it will become. It knows only that it is hot, but the craftsman knows. He has the shape in mind. He is working toward it with intention and with love. Not careless love, not distant love, but the love of someone for whom this particular piece of work matters, for whom no detail is arbitrary, for whom the timing of the fire and the cooling and the forming are all part of a plan he will not abandon. Think of the person you were 5 years ago, the questions you were asking then, the fears that seemed permanent, the things you thought you could not survive. Look at you now. You survived them. And in the surviving, something was made that did not exist before. You are not the same. That person 5 years ago could not have done what you are doing now, could not have loved the way you are loving, could not have trusted at the level you are trusting. The suffering you went through, whatever it was, made something. The fire did its work. You cannot see what you are becoming yet. You can only know this: he is still working. The fact that it still hurts is not evidence that nothing is happening. It is evidence that the work is ongoing. The finished piece does not burn. Faustina, at the end of her short life, writes with a serenity that is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of something larger than suffering. I want to love you as no human soul has ever loved you before. This is not grandiosity. This is the declaration of a soul that has been emptied and filled so many times that it no longer has pretensions, only a single orientation, toward him, always toward him. He will not waste what you are going through. He never has. He never will. Give it to him. Roughly, honestly, with all the questions still attached. Let him take it and make something from it that you cannot currently imagine. You are loved. You are being made. These are not separate facts. They are the same one.